Chapter 1. The Old Hospital. The rain drizzled through the night. The road leading to the outskirts was almost deserted. Only the sound of wind whistling through the bare, leafless trees. At the end of the road, a towering building loomed amidst the thick fog. Hung Tin General Hospital, once the city's pride. Now a decayed ruin, abandoned for more than 20 years after a horrifying fire. People had another name for it, the Death Hospital. Hung, a final-year medical student, stood before the rusty iron gate with his 3 close friends, Tuan, Lin, and Fat. The wind whistled through the cracks of the gate, creaking eerily like a lament. Tuan's voice trembled. "Are you sure about this, Hung? People say if someone enters this place at night, they never come back." Hung inhaled deeply, forcing a smile. "It's just rumors. We're medical students. We have to rely on science. We'll just take a quick look around, then leave. Nothing will happen." The heavy gate screeched open, the sound echoing through the yard like a cry. Inside, the hallway was pitch black, swallowing the weak beams of their flashlights. On the floor, dried stains of blood had turned blackish brown. Broken stretchers, rusted surgical tables lay scattered. The air was thick with mold, blended with the pungent smell of disinfectant that had lingered as if it never dispersed. Lin clung tightly to Fat's arm, her voice shaking. "Why does the disinfectant smell so strong? This hospital has been abandoned, but it feels like a surgery just happened here." Suddenly, from the end of the hallway, a chilling sound echoed. Clack, clack, clack. The steady steps of high heels. The group held their breath. Tuan swung his flashlight toward that direction. In the dim light, a white silhouette appeared, a woman in a nurse's coat, her face hidden behind an old mask, her eyes hollow, empty, piercing cold. In her hand was a medical tray, its metal glinting faintly. Her gaze was void, penetrating into their flesh. From behind the mask came a whisper, hoarse like wind hissing through cracks. "The patients need emergency care, follow me." Everyone froze. Hung trembled as realization struck. This hospital had been abandoned for 20 years, so who is this woman? Chapter 2. The Erased File. After that strange encounter, the group fled the hospital in panic. The iron gate closed behind them with a screech, as if imprisoning terrifying secrets within. For the next few days, no one in the group dared to mention what happened. But Hung was different. The cold, empty eyes of the nurse haunted him in every dream. Each time he closed his eyes, he heard the echoing footsteps, clack, 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 and the whisper, "The patient is waiting." Unable to endure it, Hung decided to investigate. He searched through old newspapers and documents in the school library. Most reports were vague: electrical accident, fire spread too fast, many doctors and nurses dead. But in one burnt personnel list, a detail struck him: a nurse named Lan. Her name crossed out in red ink, with a note beside it, "Undetermined." Hung frowned. What did "undetermined" mean? One afternoon, Hung sneaked back to the abandoned hospital alone. The sky was gray. A murder of crows cawed hoarsely on the cracked roof tiles. The air was icy, heavy with foreboding. He reached the 3rd floor, where the records room lay. Inside, thousands of files covered in dust, most charred and broken. In the corner, a rusty cabinet with a broken lock caught his attention. Hung pried it open with a metal bar. Inside lay a half-burnt plastic folder. On the cover, faded words still visible. "Personnel, Nurse Tran T. Lan." Hung's hands shook as he opened it. The first page read only a few short lines. Name: Tran T. Lan. Position: emergency ward nurse. Date of death: the 10th of December 2003. Notes: the notes section was clawed out, leaving only smeared red stains like blood. At that moment, a gust of cold wind blew through the shattered window, scattering the papers into the air. From the end of the hallway came the sound of high heels. Clack, clack, clack. Hung froze in place. His flashlight flickered and died. In the darkness, a female whisper breathed right next to his ear. "You've read my file, haven't you?" Hung spun around. Nothing but suffocating blackness. But the air reeked with a sharp, choking smell of disinfectant. Chapter 3. The White Shadow in the Dormitory. Since the day he found Nurse Lan's file, Hung had lived in constant unease. He kept it a secret from his friends, afraid they would think he was obsessed. But the strange dreams came more frequently. Every night, Hung dreamed of standing in the hospital's dark corridor. Fluorescent lights flickering above. At the far end stood the nurse in white. Her back turned. When Hung walked closer, she slowly turned around. Her eyes were hollow, black and endless like a bottomless pit. A cold whisper slipped out. "Don't abandon the patients?" Hung would jolt awake, his body drenched in sweat. Another night, when the dormitory was silent, Tuan suddenly woke up. He clearly heard the sound of high heels right outside their corridor. Thinking it was a guard on patrol, Tuan opened the door a crack. The long corridor stretched endlessly, lit dimly by flickering yellow lights. At the far end stood a white shadow, unmoving, a woman in a nurse's coat, long hair drooping down, holding a medical tray. Terrified, Tuan stumbled back, shaking Hung awake. "Hung, get up, there's someone." Both of them ran out, but the hallway was empty, only the sound of the wind through the gaps. From that night onward, Tuan changed. During the day he was exhausted, hollow-eyed. At night he woke constantly, whispering that he always heard footsteps and smelled faint disinfectant in their room. Then came the breaking point. One evening, as the group studied together, Lin suddenly screamed, pointing at the corner of the room. "There, someone is standing there." But when Hung and Fat turned, nothing was there, only darkness. Lin collapsed to the floor, her face pale as chalk, stammering, "She was there, she was staring at us." The room fell into dreadful silence. Suddenly, the fluorescent light above flickered and went out. In the suffocating darkness, a sound echoed right by the window. Clack, clack, clack. Chapter 4. The First Death. After days of strange phenomena, the whole group lived in fear. Tuan was the most tormented. Every night he woke trembling, sweat soaking his clothes. He swore he always heard a voice beside his ear. "The patient needs an injection." Hung was skeptical, yet he himself couldn't deny the heavy stench of disinfectant lingering stronger in their dorm room, as if someone had just stepped out of a surgery. One morning, chaos broke out in the dorm. Someone pounded on Hung's door. Lin's scream pierced the air. "Hung, Tuan is dead." Hung rushed over. The sight froze his blood. Tuan lay stiff on his bed, eyes wide in terror, both hands clutching the blanket. On his arm, several syringe punctures were visible, bruised and red. On the bedside table, a used syringe rolled, its needle still glistening with traces of yellow liquid. But none of them had ever owned such a thing. Fat stammered, his voice trembling. No way, we don't have any syringes or drugs in this room." Lin cried hysterically, clutching Hung. "Last night I heard high heels, and the sound of a chair scraping. A tray clattering, but I thought I was dreaming." Police arrived, but only recorded it as a possible suicide by injection. No one believed the group's words about a white shadow and footsteps in the night. That night, Hung sat alone in the room. A cold wind suddenly swept in. The curtain fluttered. On the glass window, condensation slowly formed into crooked letters. "One patient is done, 3 more remain." Hung sat paralyzed, heart pounding as if in a vice. He realized this was only the beginning. Chapter 5. The rumors spread. Tuan's death quickly spread throughout the school. At first, the news stopped at a medical student committed suicide in the dormitory. But then stories began to circulate. Some students swore that on the night Tuan died, they saw a nurse in a white coat standing right by the dormitory window. Others whispered they had heard the sound of high heels echoing endlessly along the empty corridor at midnight. From then on, the dormitory felt unnaturally cold. Students began to whisper and call it the nurse's haunted dorm. The corridor lights flickered constantly. Objects often fell or shattered for no reason. Some students became so frightened they begged to move out. In class, Lin deteriorated rapidly. She startled at everything, sometimes screaming suddenly. Once in the laboratory, she shrieked when she saw in the glass cabinet's reflection a nurse standing behind her, holding a syringe, but when she turned around, nothing was there. Fat chose denial. He avoided every conversation about it, burying himself in video games. But his sunken eyes, pale skin, and trembling hands betrayed the truth. He was being eaten alive by fear. Only Hung tried to think clearly. He refused to believe Tuan had killed himself. In his mind, the half-burnt personnel file with Nurse Lan's name, crossed out in red, hovered constantly. There was some connection between Tuan's death and the hospital's buried past. One late night, Hung stood alone on the dorm balcony. The sky was faintly lit by a pale moon. The abandoned hospital still loomed in the distance, like a shadow hidden in fog. Suddenly, from afar, the old loudspeaker system crackled to life. Though it had been disconnected for years, it emitted a distorted female voice. Code red, prepare for emergency, the next patient is coming. Hung stood frozen, blood draining from his face. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. From the night wind drifted the sharp, acrid stench of disinfectant. Chapter 6. The Nurse's Diary. Hung could not ignore the eerie announcement from the loudspeaker. Curiosity mixed with obsession drove him back once more to the abandoned hospital. Flashlight in hand, the corridors were dark, the flashlight beam sweeping across charred walls streaked black by smoke. The air was heavy with dampness, thick with the pungent stench of old disinfectant, suffocating him with every breath. He made his way to the emergency ward, the place said to be the center of the fire. Inside a scorched wooden cabinet, Hung discovered a small notebook wedged in a crack. Its cover was torn, stained with brownish smears like dried blood. On the front, scribbled in slanted handwriting, were the words, "Diary, Lan." His hands trembled as he opened to the first pages. The writing was slanted, hurried. October 5th, 2003. The shift is too long, patient number 17 has died. The doctor told me to record cardiac arrest, but I know it was an overdose of the trial drug. October 7th, 2003. 3 more patients died, all injected with that yellow solution. I am terrified, but I cannot disobey their orders. October 10th, 2003. I hear cries in the corridor. The dead still linger here. I am only a nurse. I don't want to kill anyone. The last page was torn, but smeared words remained, as if written in panic. If someone reads this, tell them. I was forced. I never wanted to be a killer. The sentence broke off, blotched with smears of darkened blood. Suddenly, the air around him turned icy cold. His flashlight flickered and died. From the darkness came a long, sorrowful sigh. You've read my secret? Hung turned sharply. In the pitch black, 2 white, glowing eyes appeared, the eyes of Nurse Lan. Chapter 7. The Locked Room. The sigh vanished, and the flashlight flickered back to life as if nothing had happened. The emergency ward was silent, but Hung's back was drenched in cold sweat. He quickly shoved the diary into his bag and turned to leave. Yet instead of escaping, a force of dread drew him deeper, down toward the basement. The staircase was damp and slippery with moss, each step echoing in the emptiness. The chill intensified as he descended, seeping into his bones. At the end of the basement corridor stood a large gray door, welded shut with thick iron bars, its surface scarred with burn marks. Across the metal, scrawled in dried red paint, were words that made his breath catch. Do not open. The death surgery room. Hung pressed his ear against the door. At first, silence, then faintly, clang, 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 like metal tapping against a tray. His heart pounded wildly. He stumbled back just as a thick, dark liquid began to seep out from beneath the door. It glistened red, carrying a nauseating stench of blood. Suddenly, the basement corridor filled with horrific sounds, dragging footsteps, labored breathing, pitiful moans like dying patients. Hung's legs trembled. He turned to run, but a whisper came right behind him. You must not open that door. Once it is opened, no one will survive. He whipped around. At the top of the stairs stood Nurse Lan, her face pale and burned, her hollow black eyes fixed on him. Her trembling hands seemed to both plead and warn. Hung dropped his flashlight. It rolled across the floor, its weak beam quivering over the stream of blood crawling out from under the door, inching slowly toward his feet. Chapter 8. The Phantom on the Operating Table. Hung panicked, grabbing his flashlight and stumbling back toward the stairs. The thick blood continued to seep from under the iron door, its stench of rot suffocating. From beyond came the echo of dragging feet, sometimes near, sometimes far, as though dozens were walking inside. Just as Hung prepared to flee, his flashlight flickered out. Darkness swallowed everything. Then suddenly, a white light burst around him. Hung froze. He was no longer in the basement but inside a bright operating room. The air was thick with the acrid stench of anesthesia and fresh blood. Before him, a surgery was taking place. 4 figures in white coats and masks, their hands dripping with blood, knives gleaming under the lights. On the table lay a patient bound tightly, mouth open in a silent scream. Among them stood Nurse Lan. Her face was hideously deformed, charred skin peeling. Half her cheek split open, revealing dark flesh beneath. Her empty white eyes locked onto Hung. The next patient, her voice rasped, echoing throughout the room. At once, the masked doctors turned toward him. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow sockets, black blood oozing from their mouths. The operating table shook violently. The patient strapped down suddenly sat up, reaching a bloodied hand toward Hung. From his mouth came a muffled, strangled cry. "Help me, please." Hung staggered back, knees buckling. The scene blurred, lights bursting into darkness. When he came to, he was on the basement floor again, sprawled before the iron door. But now, clear and wet upon the steel, was a fresh bloody handprint. From the void came a whisper, chilling his spine. "Soon, you will be the next patient." Chapter 9. The Emergency Call. After the horrifying vision in the basement, Hung returned to the dormitory. His face pale, body trembling. Lin and Fat were alarmed, but he dared not tell them everything. He only muttered that the hospital really has something unclean. That night, unease swept through the dorm again. At exactly midnight, the old loudspeaker system, long since disconnected, suddenly crackled with static. From it came a cold, distorted female voice. Code red, prepare for emergency, patient about to arrive. Hung's blood ran cold. It was the same voice he had heard in the basement. Panic spread through the students. Some rushed into the corridors. But the farther they ran, the clearer it became that the sound was coming from inside the abandoned hospital. Echoing toward the dormitory, Lin clung to Hung's arm, tears in her eyes. Could it be, we're the patients? At that moment, the corridor lights flickered madly and went out. The dorm plunged into darkness. From afar, echoing through the silence, came the chilling sound of a metal stretcher being wheeled. Screech, screech, screech. Fat's teeth chattered, whispering, "Do you hear that? Someone's pushing a stretcher toward here." Suddenly, the dorm room door banged open. The 3 of them screamed, pressing themselves against the wall. No one was there. Only a rusty stretcher stood in the middle of the room. A white sheet draped over it, soaked with dark red blood. The sheet stirred. From beneath, a pale, lifeless hand reached out, its fingers dripping blood onto the floor, leaving a crimson trail. The loudspeaker boomed again, louder, clearer. "Patient is ready. Night nurse, prepare for surgery." Hung, Lin, and Fat froze in terror, their bodies stiff. They knew then, Tuin's death was only the beginning. Chapter 10. The Hidden Truth. After the horrifying night with the bloody stretcher, Hung could no longer sit idle. He decided to uncover the truth behind Hung Tin Hospital, the death of Nurse Lan, and the patients who were claiming lives. The next day, Hung went to the city library to search old newspapers from 2003. Most articles said the same thing: electrical accident causes fire. Dozens dead. But in a small section at the back of one paper, he found a peculiar report. Some witnesses claimed patients were taken to the basement before the fire broke out. However, the hospital leadership completely denied this information. The basement, the very place Hung had seen that welded door. He dug deeper and finally tracked down an elderly doctor who had once worked at Hung Tin. At first, the old man avoided questions. But when Hung mentioned the name Nurse Lan, the doctor's face changed instantly. Terror filled his clouded eyes. You shouldn't bring up that name." His voice trembled. Back then, the hospital wasn't just treating the sick. They conducted experiments on patients, injecting trial drugs never approved. Dozens died, no one ever knew. Then, the fire? Hung pressed. The old doctor fell silent for a long moment, then whispered, "It wasn't an accident. It was a way to erase everything." Hung's heart pounded. He remembered the diary's words. "Patient number 17, yellow liquid? I was forced. And Nurse Lan?" Hung's voice shook. The old man's eyes watered. He shook his head in anguish. She was the only one who resisted. They branded her insane, accused her of killing patients. But the truth, his voice faltered. Trembling, she was locked inside when the flames came. Hung staggered back, his spine icy cold. The deaths of his friends. The hauntings, they were the result of the buried crimes of 20 years ago. That night, when Hung returned to the dorm, the loudspeaker blared again in the dark. Code red, next operation, patient is ready. This time, the voice came from inside the room. The three of them turned toward the stretcher from the night before. The white sheet was gone. In its place lay a charred corpse, twisted and burned, the stench of roasted flesh choking the air. Chapter 11. The Nurse's Curse. The dorm room reeked of burnt flesh. The body on the stretcher looked as though it had just been dragged from a fire. Its face cracked, eyes bulging wide. Lynn collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Fat vomited violently. Hung froze like a statue, unable to breathe. Suddenly, the corpse sat upright, its blackened jaw clattered, and a muffled, hoarse voice seeped out. Nurse Lan was betrayed. Everyone must die, everyone. Then the body fell backward, crumbling into ash before their horrified eyes. That night, Hung opened the diary once again. On the scorched pages, he noticed faint words hidden beneath layers of dried blood. Tilting the desk lamp, he read, October 12, 2003 final shift. They forced me to inject patient number 31. I refused. The head doctor shouted I was a traitor. They locked the duty room, bound me. Patients' screams echoed through the halls. I saw the fire spread. I don't want to die here. Beneath, a line written as if in blood. If anyone alive steps into this hospital, they will pay the blood debt for me. Hung swallowed hard, his heartbeat deafening. This was the curse of Nurse Lan, her spirit, burned alive in injustice, condemning anyone who entered. That night, as they tried to sleep, the dorm window burst open. A gust of cold air swept in, whipping the curtains. On the wall, crimson liquid slowly dripped, forming crooked words. You are the next surgery. The sound of high heels echoed again, each step pounding closer. Clack, clack, clack. The light bulb shattered, plunging the room into darkness. In the center of the room stood a white figure, her burned face twisted between laughter and tears. Nurse Lan raised her head and spoke. A blood debt must be paid in blood. Chapter 12. The Bloody Hand. The sound of high heels hammered into their skulls, making Lynn burst into sobs, while Fat trembled violently. Backing into the corner, Hung forced himself to steady his breath, gripping the weak beam of his flashlight. But it did nothing against the white figure now standing in the middle of the room. Nurse Lan slowly raised her hand. Her burned, skeletal fingers, blackened to the bone, pointed straight at Fat. The patient needs an injection. Her voice echoed like a groan from the grave. Fat screamed, trying to run to the door, but his body seized up. He collapsed, clutching his left arm. From beneath his skin, syringe punctures began to appear, one after another, oozing fresh blood. The marks spread quickly, snaking up to his shoulder. Blood gushed from the wounds, dripping steadily onto the floor with a sickening stench. Hung, save me, Fat screamed, eyes bulging. But Hung could only watch, helpless, as Fat writhed in agony. The punctures multiplied, bleeding profusely, as though every vein in his body was being drained dry. Lynn fainted, collapsing onto the floor. Hung clutched his head, screaming, Stop, we didn't do anything. A laugh rang out, hoarse and mocking, chilling the air. You're just patients. None of you can escape the final surgery. Fat's voice broke, body shuddering. I'm so cold. Then his body jerked violently once, eyes wide open. Before going limp, his hand slid off the bed, blood dripping down to the floor. The stain spread, forming the shape of a bloody handprint crawling across the tiles. Hung fell to his knees, trembling uncontrollably. He knew then, Tuin's death was only the opening act. Fat's death was the undeniable proof. The nurse's curse had begun to claim them. In the suffocating silence, a whisper slithered into Hung's ear. 3 patients are finished, 2 remain. Chapter 13. The Final Night Shift. After Fat's gruesome death, the dormitory sank into despair. Lynn was nearly driven mad with fear, while Hung grew weaker each day. Haunted and sleepless, they decided to abandon the dorm and move into a rented room outside, hoping distance would bring safety. But no matter where they went, The shadow of Nurse Lan followed relentlessly. That night, Hung drifted into uneasy sleep. In his dream, he found himself standing in a brightly lit hospital corridor. The ticking of a clock echoed, its second hand moving slowly. From overhead speakers came an announcement. Beginning night shift. Nurse Lan, prepare for emergency. Hung spun around. Behind the duty desk sat Lan, not the burned specter, but a young woman, gentle, with her hair neatly tied, fatigue in her warm eyes. He whispered, "Sister Lan." She looked up, sadness flickering deep in her gaze. "You're a medical student, aren't you? Did you come to relieve my shift?" Before Hung could answer, the scene warped. Light bulbs exploded, sparks raining down. Flames erupted in the distance. Smoke surged down the hallway. Lan leapt up in terror, rushing to the duty room door, but it slammed shut from the outside. The sound of the bolt locking echoed like thunder. "No, open the door. There are patients inside. Don't let them die." She pounded desperately, voice raw with panic. But the hurried footsteps outside faded away. The fire spread quickly, consuming walls, crawling across desks. Lan turned back, her eyes full of despair as she met Hung's gaze. "Do you see? They abandoned us. The doctors, the leaders, all of them. I never wanted to kill anyone, but they forced me." Hung screamed, running to her, but his body passed through like smoke. He could only watch the flames engulf her, her hair igniting, her face twisting in agony. Before her body was devoured by fire, her eyes glowed, piercing straight into his. "Remember, this final night shift never ended." Hung awoke with a jolt, sweat soaking his shirt. But what made his blood run cold was this. The door of his rented room was locked from the outside. Chapter 14. The Fatal IV Drip. The door of the rented room was locked tight from the outside, making Hung panic. He rushed to bang and rattle it, but it wouldn't budge. Lin slumped to the floor, tears streaming down her face, stammering, Someone's locking us in." From the hallway outside came the sound of high heels. Clack, clack, clack. The steady rhythm grew closer with each step. The lights in the room suddenly went out. Darkness smothered everything. When Hung lifted his phone flashlight toward the corner, where moments before there had been nothing, now stood an old IV stand. Suspended from it was a bag of yellowish fluid. The drip fell, one drop at a time. Tick, 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 even though no one touched it. Suddenly, the tube slithered like a snake, stretching out and wrapping itself tightly around Lin's wrist. The needle jabbed straight into her vein. "Ah, help me," Lin screamed, thrashing desperately. Hung lunged forward, pulling, but the tubing clung stubbornly as though it had fused with her flesh. The yellow liquid began to flow into her body. Within seconds, Lin convulsed violently, her veins bulging beneath her skin. Her eyes rolled wildly, then fixed wide, as foam bubbled from her mouth. Hung yanked the needle out. Blood spurted in a crimson spray, splattering the walls. The IV bag dropped, shattering on the floor, its foul yellow contents spilled, mixing with Lin's blood into a sickening puddle. She collapsed into Hung's arms, gasping weakly. I see them. So many people, lying on stretchers, they're calling me, to the operating room." Then her eyes glazed over, her hand slipping coldly from his grasp. The room stank of blood and disinfectant. From the toppled IV stand came the familiar whisper. "Third patient, complete." Hung sat frozen, clutching Lin's lifeless body. He knew now, he was the only one left, and he would be the final operation. Chapter 15. The Vengeful Spirit. The rented room was drowned in a suffocating silence. Hung sat collapsed on the floor, cradling Lin's lifeless body. Her glassy eyes were still wide open, as though she couldn't accept her sudden death. A gust of cold wind burst through the window, carrying with it the pungent stench of disinfectant. The curtains flailed violently. From the wall, long streaks of blood trickled downward, slowly forming crooked words. "The final operation has come." Hung trembled, his voice breaking as he shouted into the air. "Lan, if you have resentment, take it all out on me. Don't make them die anymore." The room shook violently. The light bulbs exploded, glass raining down. In the center of the dark room, a white glow burst forth. Nurse Lan appeared. She was no longer hazy and half-seen, but clear and solid, half-human, half-specter. Her burned face was twisted, her hollow white eyes blazing. each echoing step of her heels, clack, 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 pressed into Hung's chest like a hammer. They forced me to inject the drugs, forced me to kill. When I refused, they locked me in the duty room. They left me to burn. The patients' souls, their cries still bind me here. I can never leave. Her voice cracked, shifting between sobs and a hideous laugh. A blood debt must be paid in blood. And you will replace them. Hung screamed desperately. No, we have nothing to do with this. We're just students, curious. All at once, dozens of burned, charred patients appeared around him, crawling across the floor, their flesh peeled, eyes hollow, mouths groaning the same words. Save us, save us. But then, in unison, they turned their empty gazes toward Hung. Their blood-stained hands reached for him. Lan stood among them, her scorched lips twisting into a grotesque smile. You will be the final patient. The room warped violently. Hung felt countless bloody hands dragging him downward, pulling him into endless darkness, like being dragged straight into hell. Chapter 16. Live Surgery. Hung's eyes flew open. He was no longer in the rented room. He was strapped tightly onto a cold operating table, the restraints cutting into his wrists and ankles. Above him, the surgical lamp glared down, flooding his face with blinding white light. The air was thick with the stench of anesthetic mixed with the metallic tang of fresh blood. Around him stood shadowy figures in white coats, their masks stained with blackened blood. They moved silently, arranging scalpels, forceps, bone saws, syringes, all gleaming cruelly under the light. The metallic clatter rang out, echoing like a death knell. From among them stepped Nurse Lan. Her burned, twisted hand held a scalpel, the blade glinting coldly. Her white eyes were lifeless, but her mouth stretched into a grotesque smile. The final patient is ready, she whispered. Hung thrashed violently, screaming, No, I'm not a patient, let me go. But the leather straps tightened even further, biting into his flesh until blood seeped out. A doctor beside him, voice muffled and heavy, intoned, Prepare anesthesia. Immediately, a cracked oxygen mask was pressed against Hung's face. He gasped, the acrid fumes burning through his nose. His head spun, vision blurring. Through the haze, he heard his own heartbeat pounding. Then came the steady beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor. Lan leaned over him, her lifeless white eyes boring into his. Her whisper seeped into his soul. Your heart will complete the final operation. The scalpel descended. Hung screamed as icy steel sliced across his chest. Pain exploded, searing through his flesh. Warm blood gushed, splattering across the table. He could hear the sickening sound of metal cutting through tissue, the crunch of bone under forceps. His scream choked in his throat. In the final flickers of consciousness, Hung saw them, rows of charred patients standing at the far end of the room. Their hollow eyes locked on him. In unison, they groaned, Save us, save us. Chapter 17. The Betrayer. Hung woke with a start, his body drenched in cold sweat. His breathing was ragged, and his chest throbbed with a dull, stabbing pain as though it had truly been cut open. He pressed his trembling hand against his chest, no wound. Yet the ache was real, burning. In that nightmare, one phrase still echoed in his mind, Your heart will complete the final operation. Unable to endure any longer, Hung decided to return home and confront his father, once a doctor at Hung Tin Hospital. Perhaps the only one who knew the truth. The old house was quiet, dimly lit. His father sat on a wooden chair, aged and frail, eyes clouded with years, staring blankly as though lost in another world. Hung's voice shook. Father, do you know anything about Nurse Lan? At the mention of the name, his father's eyes widened in terror. His hands trembled as he reached for a cigarette, his voice quivering. Why you've spoken that name? Tell me the truth, Father. My friends are dead, and something is haunting me. Is it because of you? The old man's cigarette slipped from his fingers. He clutched his head in his hands, his voice breaking into a rasp. That year, I was the chief doctor on duty. It was I who signed the order forcing Lan to inject the trial drugs. Hung's face went numb, his whole body stiffening. His father's eyes glistened with tears. His voice cracked with guilt. Lan refused. She resisted, but the board threatened her, said they'd destroy her life, her family. They locked her in the duty room. I didn't save her. Hung's lips trembled, and during the fire, the old man's shoulders shook violently. When the flames rose, I ran. I left her. I left all the patients trapped in the basement. Hung staggered back, eyes wide with fury and horror. So all those souls, they suffer because of you? His father broke down, weeping bitterly. Yes, I am the betrayer. I caused the curse, and now, they're coming for you. To make me pay through your blood. At that moment, the window burst open with a deafening crash. A freezing wind swept through, snuffing out the lamp. In the darkness came the echo of high heels. Clack, clack, clack. And then, a woman's mournful whisper. The betrayer must pay. Chapter 18. The Burning Night. The icy wind tore through the house, rattling the window frames. Hung and his father sat frozen, darkness swallowing the room. The sound of high heels echoed, clack, 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 bouncing off the walls, coming from everywhere at once. Suddenly, the world warped. Hung felt his body yanked violently out of reality. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in his house. He was standing in Hung Tin Hospital 20 years ago. The air reeked of disinfectant. Doctors in white coats rushed through the halls. Patients moaned in pain from their rooms. The hospital was alive. Then, alarms shrieked. Fire burst out from a basement lab. Flames spreading rapidly along the wooden walls. Thick black smoke billowed, swallowing the corridors. Hung's eyes widened in horror as he saw his father, younger, among the doctors. Without hesitation, they bolted for the exit, ignoring the terrified cries of patients left behind. Father, Hung screamed, but no one heard him. He turned and froze. Nurse Lan was bound inside the duty room, pounding frantically at the locked door. Her hoarse screams tore through the chaos. Open the door. There are patients inside. Don't leave them. But the doctors rushed past, pretending not to hear. The fire roared, licking at the frame. Lan's screams grew desperate, her voice raw. Please, don't leave us. The flames engulfed her. She spun toward Hung, her eyes blazing through smoke and fire. Her voice cracked with both laughter and sobs. Do you see? This is the truth. This was my final night, but it never ended. The ceiling collapsed with thunderous crashes. Fire devoured the hallways. Patients staggered, their clothes aflame, crawling, shrieking. Their skin blistered and charred as they reached for Hung. In the choking smoke, dozens of burned figures appeared, their bodies writhing as they dragged themselves closer. Their hollow voices whispered in unison. Die with us, die as we did. Chapter 19. Blood and Fire. The fire roared, swallowing the entire corridor in crimson flames. Black smoke rolled like waves, searing Hung's lungs and burning his eyes. All around him, burned patients crawled and staggered, their flesh peeling away, their hollow eyes glowing white. Die with us, they moaned, voices choking and broken. A flaming hand clutched Hung's ankle. He screamed as searing heat scorched his skin. He kicked frantically, but more charred hands rose from the blood-soaked floor, gripping him, dragging him down. The world twisted violently. Hung blinked and found himself lying inside a surgery room engulfed in fire. Surgical tools, scalpels, forceps, bone saws, lay scattered across the floor, their metal glowing red-hot. The stench of burning flesh was overwhelming. On the opposite tables, Lin, Fat, and Tuan lay motionless. Then suddenly, their eyes snapped open, their faces, disfigured and burned, turned toward him. Their voices groaned in unison, filled with agony. Hung, why did you leave us? Die with us? Tears streamed down Hung's face. No, I never abandoned you. I never wanted this. A high-pitched laugh pierced the flames. Nurse Lan emerged, her body half human, half demon, her scorched face twisted into a grotesque grin, her empty eyes blazing with fire. In her charred hand gleamed a scalpel, dripping blood. Blood and fire are tonight's destiny. The final operation must begin. The flames surged higher. The burned patients fused with the bodies of his dead friends, rising from the tables like puppets. They stumbled toward Hung, their mouths stretched wide in ghastly smiles. Blood gushed from the floor, flowing like a river, mixing with the fire until it hissed and steamed, filling the air with a revolting stench. The loudspeaker blared through the inferno. Code Red, emergency surgery, prepare to extract the final heart. Hung screamed, but the flood of blood and fire surged around him. and the vengeful dead closed in. Chapter 20. The Final Operation. Hung struggled desperately, trapped amidst the sea of blood and fire. The burned patients surged toward him, their hollow eyes gleaming, their cries mixing with the clatter of metal instruments. An operating table rose upright before him. Invisible hands wrenched him off his feet and slammed him onto its cold surface. Leather straps tightened around his wrists and ankles, binding him fast. Nurse Lan appeared. This time, her form was terrifyingly clear, half human, half demon. One side of her face still bore the gentle features of the woman she once was, while the other was charred, exposing raw flesh and bone. Her white eyes shone with ghostly fire. In her hand gleamed a blood-stained scalpel. Her voice echoed like a dirge. "The final patient is ready. The last surgery will end everything." The scalpel sliced into his chest. Hung screamed as white-hot pain tore through his body, blood spurting across the table. Through the agony, visions flooded his mind, his childhood, his father in a white coat, smiling warmly. Then the image shifted, his father abandoning Nurse Lan, fleeing the inferno as patients screamed. Hung sobbed, tears mingling with blood. "Lan, if you want revenge, take my heart, but please, spare the others." The scalpel froze. Nurse Lan's white eyes flickered. For a moment, her burned visage softened, revealing the sorrowful nurse she once was. Her voice trembled. "You would die for them?" "Yes," Hung cried. "If my life can free you, and them, then take it." Silence fell. The flames around them guttered and vanished. The burned patients ceased their moans, their hollow eyes closing at last. Lan dropped the scalpel. Tears of blood streamed down her ruined face. Her whisper faded like wind. "Thank you. The final operation is complete." A blinding white light engulfed everything. Hung lost consciousness. At dawn, people found Hung collapsed at the hospital gate. He was unconscious, a long scar carved across his chest like a surgical incision, but his heart still beat. Hung Tin Hospital stood silent, lifeless, yet on nights when the wind howled through its shattered halls, people swore they still heard the echo of high heels striking the floor. The final operation never truly ended.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.